What it do? It's Chuck Nasty again here today. Happy Super Bowl Sunday, everyone. You know, I had to rep my boy Matthew Stafford. Big ups to him. Hope he has a great Super Bowl today. In fact, a big parlay getting put out today for over on Stafford yards. But regardless, welcome back. How about those NBA games last night? Absolutely awesome night. A lot of upsets that I didn't see coming and a couple that I fortunately did. But the fucking New York Knicks ruined my night, and they were the first team to play. They blew a 25-point lead. It was just ridiculous. So a lot to get into today. I'm going to be super short and sweet with my recap from yesterday. Overall, we went 8-3 on our picks, pretty solid. The Knicks, though, I had a parlay with all of these picks in it, just $1 to pay out, like a pretty nice payout, obviously, when you stack this many. The Knicks were up by let me see the box score. The Knicks were up heading into the fourth quarter before Anthony Simons proved that he is once again that dude. He absolutely took over the game. I think he finished with something like 30-11 or something like that. Dude is going to be an absolute stud. 30-8. Absolutely insane game. And the Knicks just absolutely could not buy a bucket down the stretch of the fourth quarter. The Knicks are in trouble. I'm not going to overreact again because we knew this coming into yesterday and coming into this stretched pre-All-Star break. But the New York Knicks they don't have a dude who can get his own bucket when the time comes. Julius Randle obviously had a decent game with 28, 16, and 6. That's incredible stats. But if you watch the game, basically a non-factor down the stretch. They scored, I think, 11 points in the fourth quarter. They were up big and they just absolutely blew it. It was devastating to me because I'm watching the TV. I'm barely even watching the game. And then the New York Knicks are up 20. I'm like looking forward to watching some of the later games, including like the Kings Wizards. And then I check again, I throw the fourth quarter on and it's like 99-98. And I was just like, how did they blow that lead? And you see there, it was pretty close with like 5 minutes left and the Blazers just hit absolute money. So definitely discouraged with the bet. But as we saw, there were a couple other W's that we got. Grizzlies money line. I'll talk about that game in just a second. But then we had the Kings. We called the Spurs upsetting the Pellies. Sixers obviously took care of business against the Cavs at home. The Raptors had a very, very close loss to the Nuggets. We'll talk about that game in just a minute. But then we called the Heat and Bulls wins. The Mavs lost to the Clippers. That was unfortunate. And then the one lock that I had that did go through was Warriors money line. Hopefully you didn't hop in on that stupid one of Steph with the over on the points. Clay obviously took over and had an incredible game, scoring the most points he's had since his return. And then Suns money line taking care of business against the Orlando Magic. So just going to break down these games. I already touched on the Knicks Blazers. The Knicks, I don't even want to talk about them anymore. They ruined my night and I'm done. The Grizzlies Hornets game was very interesting too, because the Grizzlies were up massive at the half. If you look at the stat line, I believe it was, 36-15 in the first quarter, then 38-28. So they had a 38-point lead, if I did my math, or 31-point lead, excuse me, at halftime. And then the Hornets came storming back. At one point, I believe it was a 4-point game. I was watching closely, and I know Ja exited the game at one point. He finished with 26, but quick shout out as well to Terry Rozier, LaMelo Ball, and honestly, Montrezl Harrell too. He was instrumental for them down the stretch. I didn't even mention him in my video yesterday, but that acquisition has paid off at least so far for Charlotte with having a big man coming off the bench. Typically would have hoped to see Charlotte acquire like someone a little bit bigger, someone who like Miles Turner, as I mentioned, who would be able to really hold down the fort and be that lob threat on the offensive end. But credit to Charlotte for fighting back. Obviously, Memphis is and deservedly won. They're the better team. But, it was definitely exciting down the stretch. And so glad that pick ended up going through. The Kings Wizards was super interesting because it was very back and forth throughout the start of the game. And I was starting to sweat it a little bit just because the Wizards were keeping up fairly well and the Kings couldn't seem to really get a stop. But then they kind of pulled away towards the late third quarter, early fourth. And we saw some brilliant flashes out of Domantas Sabonis with the passing, but also De'Aaron Fox had a great game as well. I wish it would just show me the box score right away. But we see here De'Aaron Fox, he went 10 for 21, which is a pretty solid stat line, 6 for 7 from the line, and then he had 4 assists. But Domantas Sabonis, I felt like, was the difference maker, plus minus plus 13. And De'Aaron Fox finishing with 26 points. Harrison Barnes also playing his role, going 78% from the field. Like super solid stat lines. And I felt like the Kings are starting to kind of gel together at least a little bit. Obviously, we're only a few games into the like post acquisition, but they're going to be a really, really fun team to watch as they start clicking and gelling and making a push for that play-in spot. Next up are the Spurs Pelicans. This is the one that I was most proud of, I guess, because I did call this one, and Pelicans were, 6.5 point favorites. So it was somewhat of an upset. But for those of us watching and those of us who know DeJounte Murray is an absolute dog, we're seeing just an absolutely different level of play and improvement from DeJounte Murray. There are those who saw this coming. I didn't. But the play that he has had over the last couple weeks and this year in general, and even just year over year, is really awesome to watch. And I would put him in my list of like top 5 most exciting players to watch, even just from the game last night. I faded the Spurs 2 nights ago, and they hurt me, so I bet on them this time, and it worked out. So definitely going to keep an eye on this Spurs team because they're right there in the mix for the play-in spot as well. And no one really talked about them. A lot of people think they're just trying to tank with all the trades that they made. But look out for this Spurs team. DeJounte Murray, I would put him, again, up there with Luka in regard to like carrying that team. Obviously, they also have some other pieces that played very well. And CJ McCollum with 36, 11, and 5. He's clearly starting to click down in New Orleans. So exciting stuff, but not going to overreact to this win for the Spurs or this loss for the Pellies. Pellies need to be better at home, though. They shouldn't be losing that game. Joel Embiid. Oh, my God. Joel is he is playing at a level that is just unfathomable. 40-point triple-double. He, you look at it, he's teaming up with James Harden, who's one of the only other players to put up those kind of numbers, like historically. So obviously that's something to be excited about. But in this game in particular, going up against a team that's been proven so far this season, at least, to be at that 2 spot coming into yesterday, to beat them at home by 10, especially when it was not super close. I don't want to say that they were up like 20 or 15, but it was about a 10 to 15 point lead for the Sixers pretty much the entire way. Cavs kept trying to put a run together, but the 76ers at home, the crowd, and Joel Embiid's play really held them off. Shout out to Darius Garland, because as I mentioned, he's playing just year over year much better, but he's really starting to come into his role as the star point guard for this team. And so again, it's just super exciting to watch the Cavs team, but 76ers pulling it out. Was glad that we included them on our picks, but that doesn't mean I like the fans. The Nuggets Raptors. This is the game that I watched most intently, and there's a lot to unpack with this one, at least from what I watched. Number one is Pascal Siakam is an incredibly underrated, underappreciated, and undervalued piece to the NBA. Pascal Siakam putting up 35, 10, and 7, but his impact was all over the court. Granted, they ended up losing this game, and I was disappointed because I said yesterday, don't bet against an 8-game win streak, and they unfortunately dropped one at home to a Nuggets team that feels quite depleted. But on the flip side of things, they were right there. They had a shot for the win. They had 2 shots, actually. And that brings me to Nikola Jokic. He made some of the most vital plays down the stretch. And while he did miss a clutch free throw to put them up, or to put them up by a larger margin, he had the game sealing block on OG Anunoby after basically Fred VanVleet hit a 3-pointer to make it a 1-point game. Jokic misses the free throw. They get the board timeout, and then they come down and they get a shot for Fred VanVleet. It's a rainbow shot. It looks like it's good. And then it misses. Unfortunately, OG Anunoby gets the board, and I'm thinking like, holy shit, like we're about to win and one of my locks is going to go through. And then Nikola Jokic came in and just destroyed all of that hope. They ended up winning the game on that game sealing block. They reviewed it. It was super clean. And so I just got to give a shout out to these big men that are playing at just a completely different level. A few years ago, Shaq made a few comments where it was like, the big man has become soft. It's not included in the game. And with the emergence of Steph Curry, we really saw like a shift towards more versatile players where 3-point and defense is the priority. But what we're seeing from Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and throw Pascal Siakam in there too, is just absolutely insane. It's inspiring for the league. It's good for the league. And it's good basketball. And it was really a captivating game to watch. Obviously, this Nuggets team is likely going to make the playoffs just because Nikola Jokic is carrying them at that level. They also have some good supporting pieces that played pretty well last night, hit some tough shots down the stretch against a Raptors team that's been really good defensively. The Nets Heat. This game felt like a playoff game. The energy down in Miami, the Heat were up, I think it was like 21 or like around there. And I turned the game off. I flipped to a different game because the Bulls were losing. So I went to watch what was going on with that. And then I checked my phone and the Nets are slowly starting to trickle away at that lead. Kyrie had a phenomenal second half and he is the definition of poetry on the court. When he plays, there's a clip of him like weaving through defenders and he is so silky smooth. One of the most entertaining players to watch in the aspect of the game. The Miami Heat proved their depth yesterday. This game felt like if you're the Nets, you're feeling encouraged in this loss. Even I know you shouldn't feel encouraged in a loss, and that's now 11 straight for the Nets, which isn't great. However, without KD, without Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, or Andre Drummond, 4 players that, in my opinion, are going to be in the top end of their team in regard to like talent, they're not even playing. You're basically going with just Kyrie Irving, Patty Mills, and a couple other names that I couldn't even name right now. And they competed against the number 1 seed Miami Heat at Miami. So it just shows that when they need to be there, when the playoffs come, this team is going to be scary because if they are at full strength, I don't know that I see a team beating them in that 7-game series. However, as I mentioned, the Miami Heat's depth really proved itself here. You see the leading scorer was Bam Adebayo with 19 for Miami. But when you look at the stat line, almost every single one of their starters, including Tyler Hero coming off the bench, scored in double figures. The Miami Heat have options. They're able to swing it around. And when you try and lock on a specific player to shut them down, they got another dude waiting right there ready to hit the shot. So the Miami Heat are, just as well proved their worth and proved how scary they can be. And I guess the only other takeaways I would have are just to keep an eye out for the Nets. And as we see Seth Curry and Andre Drummond start getting minutes, hopefully in the next week, it'll be a really, really interesting time in the league. So be sure to watch those games. It'll be fun. The Thunder nearly gave me a fucking heart attack. The Thunder were, back and forth. Zach LaVine is out, and I saw an update from Woj today that he's going out to LA to get his knee checked due to some recurring issues, soreness, and pain that he's been having in the knee. So I guess just, prayers and thoughts out to Zach LaVine. Hopefully it's nothing too serious and he's able to recover, because I do think that this Bulls team the league's better when everyone's at full strength and healthy, right? You never wish an injury on anyone. But especially in the context of this Bulls season, you'd really like to see them, start getting healthy. And this would be a pretty big setback for the Bulls if he were to be out for an extended period of time. Shout out to Lou Dort. He was playing on a mission last night, and these Thunder men, they play with no fear. They're pulling up from taking, some might consider dumb shots, but they're making them, and they're contending and they're fighting. And I was really proud of Vukovic for the effort he put up in the first half to keep the Bulls in it, because it really felt like it was like, I don't want to say getting away from them, but they were down 8 to 12 points early on, and it kind of worried me out a little bit. But DeMar DeRozan took over in the second half. Vukovic played an incredible first half, and I think had over 20 points in the first half. So he was playing well. DeRozan stepped up. And if you watch him down the stretch, there is no one else in the league that I want the ball in their hands down the stretch. It was mid-range jumper after mid-range jumper, contested shot after contested shot. DeMar DeRozan, look out for him in the playoffs, because that dude is a sniper in clutch time. Next up, Clippers Mavs. The Clippers are playing such well-coached basketball. They're playing really, really well and around that 500 spot for a team that you really wouldn't expect to be at that level, missing their two best players with Kawhi and Paul George. Reggie Jackson has stepped up, and I was happy yesterday because my parlay for this game was Mavs money line. It obviously didn't hit, but Mavs money line, Reggie Jackson over on points assists, Luka over on points assists. And then I had Dorian Finney-Smith, which was stupid. Never bet on Dorian Finney-Smith because Jalen Brunson's the number 2 now. Or even honestly, Reggie Bullock would be a better pick than Finney-Smith. I don't know how he got that 4-year deal and he's playing like this, but regardless, the Mavs had a shot. Luka got a buzzer beater up to win it, but unfortunately it was a miss. And you can't fault him. He put up 45, 15, and 8. He was carrying the team, and down the fourth quarter he had like 23 points. And so at that point it was just they could not get a stop. Reggie Jackson made some incredible plays. He got his own offensive board and then hit a 3, and it was like a 5-point trip down to put them up 8. And obviously you see there with the Clippers winning by 2, Luka taking over, like it would have been a much different story if they don't get that offensive board with like 48 seconds left to go up by as much as they did. So I guess key takeaways, don't bet on Dorian Finney-Smith. Bet on Reggie Jackson because he is playing some really, really solid basketball and appears to be improving. Even though we've seen these games from him and we've seen these points. So I guess this is advice from me, like on the record, Reggie Jackson is a baller. So bet on him, and fastest dude I've ever seen on the court, maybe behind De'Aaron Fox, but the Mavericks are going to be fine. I think they're still hovering around that 4 or 5 spot. So next up, we're going to go to the Lakers and Warriors. This game was much closer than I thought it was going to be. I predicted a Warriors 10-point win minimum, and I predicted that Steph Curry was going to go over on points. Fortunately, Clay did bail him out. Steph had, I think, like not around 15 to 20 in the first half, so he was looking good to reach over 30, and then second half just kind of cooled off. And again, let's not overreact to Steph. He's hit this milestone for all-time three-pointers made earlier in the year. And since then, you could call it a slump. He's certainly not shooting the ball as well as he was at the start of the year or in years past. But again, let's not get recency bias like affecting us. That's my big thing, is like, let's take the whole context. Steph Curry, he's going to be fine. And when the Warriors make the playoffs, they are going to be a scary out, especially as Draymond hopefully heals up in the coming weeks. Klay Thompson, he had his best outing since his return, over 30 points for the first time since he got back. And down the stretch in the fourth quarter, he was instrumental for overcoming this scrappy Lakers performance. Shifting over to the Lakers, and I still need to do my Western Conference breakdown where I kind of break down the teams. LeBron James had a pretty solid game. Shout out to LeBron as well, taking over. I think he passed to Will or Kareem. It was one of those two. I don't even know who had it before. But he is now the leading scorer in regular and postseason combined, leading scorer in NBA history. Give the man his flowers while he's still here, because he is not going to be around for another 5-10 years. I don't know. I think he's going to try and hang around till Bronny's in the league, but regardless of that, he deserved a much more amount of celebration for that milestone. He didn't really get any stoppage of play or applause or media attention for it. I feel like most of the attention I was seeing was coming from Twitter. So I hope that he got all the praise that, he deserves for that. But of course, down the stretch, I don't know if LeBron was really the problem here. He obviously missed those clutch free throws at the end, but we've seen that from LeBron. And I think it's ridiculous to expect the dude to hit 3 when historically he's like around a 66 to 75% free throw shooter. I don't blame him, because again, those big pressure moments when you're not playing well this season and you need this win. LeBron hasn't been in that position a ton, and we've never really seen him hit those shots. He did get bailed out with the foul call at the end to potentially give them an opportunity to tie the game. And then he went obviously 1 for 3, missing the first one, making the second, and then intentionally missing the third. If you're a Lakers fan, you're somewhat encouraged because Russell Westbrook did play marginally better. this game, and I felt like the team, especially Austin Reeves too, coming off the bench, he was playing out of his mind. And that's a dude that you're going to see probably get some more minutes. I just don't know what to make of this Lakers team, because 26-31, probably 2 more games before they head into the All-Star break. And you don't feel super great, obviously, because you were right there and you had a lead with a couple minutes left, and then Clay had other plans. But don't bet on the Lakers and don't trust in these Lakers until they prove otherwise. And I think we should, while I will make that video, I think the league needs to stop giving the Lakers so much attention until they get into that playoff picture, because although they are in the play-in spot right now, they are a scary first round draw, but I do feel like other teams are worthy of some more attention, including like the Warriors or even the Nuggets with what Jokic is doing out there. But those teams, they don't get as much attention, and it's quite frustrating. But then this Suns Magic game, obviously the Suns took care of business and beat up on a Magic team that's super outmatched. The Suns are a title contending team, and so this game wasn't even really supposed to be very close. But great game from Devin Booker, putting up 26, 5, and 5. And as I mentioned, Jalen Suggs coming into his own, playing better and better each game. 26 and 10 for him. I didn't particularly watch a ton of this game. I know Chris Paul was playing quite well in the first half. But this Suns team is solid, and they now have a 5-game lead on the Warriors, or around there. So, look for the Suns to continue their run. They're gelling. They've got the synergy of a team that's looking to make a run. So don't sleep on them. And if you're picking other teams to go to the finals or a first round exit for the Suns team, then you're just sleeping on them. Looking ahead to today's games, there's only 2 games on. Obviously, we have the Super Bowl tonight, and so the only 2 games that we're going to be able to see today are the Hawks Celtics. Celtics being 7.5-point favorites. In this game, just initially, I certainly like the Celtics just because of the recent winning that they've put together. The Hawks haven't been able to get a stop when they need to, and going on the road on an afternoon Sunday game, I don't totally expect the Hawks to shoot as well. So I would probably pick Celtics money line. That would be one of my picks for today. And then this Pacers Timberwolves game is definitely going to be an interesting one because they just played recently. The Pacers leading, and then I unless I'm forgetting this incorrectly, but I'm fairly certain that they just played recently, and the Timberwolves ended up winning by about 6 points. Or maybe that was the Cavs. That was the Cavs I'm thinking of. My bad. But Timberwolves Pacers, it's going to be an interesting game. Seeing Cat, Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell. I think Beasley's also on that team, unless I'm thinking of someone else. But Patrick Beverley too. It's going to be interesting to see how the Pacers match up. I don't particularly love the matchup, especially down in the post. It'll be interesting to see if Miles Turner can get those stops on Karl Anthony Towns, but look for Tyrese Halliburton to have another solid game. I don't totally foresee him struggling down the stretch the way that he did in that Cavs game, just because of because they're at home, because they lost that other game close. But I would expect the Timberwolves to win this one just because of the directions both teams are heading in. The Timberwolves are trending upward and looking to make that push for a higher playoff seed. And Pacers, as I talked about yesterday, they just feel like a team that's probably going to play hard in the first half and then let off the gas a little bit in that effort to get a better draft pick. So again, I don't like doing the covers, but I would pick Celtics and Timberwolves today. And those are my picks, and those are my thoughts heading into a Super Bowl Sunday. So hopefully you all have the quality time to spend time with friends and family for the game. I'm going to be betting on the Rams and Stafford to have a great game, but either way, I'm just hoping for a close game. I'm hoping that both teams show a lot of passion in the fight. But that's all for today's video. Be sure to check in for the Western Conference breakdown either later tonight or early tomorrow. But thank you again for watching, and hope you all have a great day.